In this lesson titled Using Data Validation Tools, we're in Workbook Lesson 12, Data Management, and we're on Worksheet tab, Validate. We're going to be talking about the data validation tools, and you can use data validation to restrict the type of data or the values that users enter into a cell. One of the most common data validation uses is to create a drop-down list, and you've probably seen those, and they're a pretty cool feature. So let's talk about these features right now. Here we have up in A1 a header called ID number, and we're expecting to put in a bunch of ID numbers here. And you can see here we also want to put in the status, department, and their building. Well, with data validation tools, we can restrict the kind of information, the type of values that we enter in here. Let's start with some ideas for an ID number. Let's say the organization where we work uses a 6 and sometimes 7-digit ID number that, typically maybe starts with a letter of the alphabet. And we want to make sure that no one is entering a 4-digit or a 5-digit or an 8-digit, just a 6 or a 7. So let's take a look at how we could do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the A column to select all of A, and then come over to my Data tab, and in the Data Tools group, I have Data Validation. You can click right on this button, or you can use the drop-down list. Let's start with the drop-down list, and I will select Data Validation. And we get the Data Validation dialog box. And we have 3 tabs, and it starts in the Settings tab. This basically is just asking us what the criteria is. What should we allow and what should we not allow? Well, first choice is allow any value. And we might say in some cases that's what we want, but we don't. Here's our other choices: whole number, decimal, list, date, time, text length. Well, that's what we want. We want to control the length of our ID number. So I'll click on that. And we can make that exact, not between, equal to, not equal to, greater than, less than. We're going to say between. And we decided that it could be 6 or it could be up to 7. So it can't be less than 6 and it can't be more than 7. And we're going to say OK. So let's try that now. We're about to enter in our data, and let's maybe start with a letter of the alphabet, maybe W, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 7 total, and I'll hit Enter to accept and move down 1 cell. And it was fine with that. Let's try another one. W, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now we have 9, and we get this error message: this value doesn't match the data validation restriction defined for this cell, and you can retry again. So I click Retry. My data is highlighted, so it's ready for me just to type on my keyboard again. I don't need to click anywhere. And I'll try again. W, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and only 5. I'm going to delete that 6. So now we only have 6 total characters, and that was okay as well. So we can't go below or above those minimums that we set. Now, I mentioned earlier one of the most common ways that data validation is used is to create drop-down lists, and that is very simple to do. Let's take a look at it. Here we have status, and we don't want to have to type full-time, contract, half-time, hourly, and spell it right each time and get the hyphen right and our capitalization right each time. We just wanted to just pick from this list so that it's always done right. It's very easy to do. Once again, we just select all of the area we're interested in, all of the B column in this case. Go to Data Validation, and instead of any value, I'm going to choose List. And now it simply asks me what the source is for that list. And I have a source right here. Now in these dialog boxes, you typically see this little up arrow. And all that does is shrink the dialog box so it's completely out of the way, and we can just grab the data or the whole range of data that we need. So I'm going to grab this range of data, it puts it in there, and then I click this button again and I see my whole dialog box. So anytime you see these, all it's doing is getting all of the rest of the dialog box out of your way for you. So with that list in there, all I have to do is hit OK. And now you'll see I actually have a drop down arrow right here. Let's just try one of these. I click in the cell, I get a drop down arrow, and there's my list: full-time, contract, half-time, hourly. Click here, full-time. So extremely useful. What if I click here and try to just start typing full-time? It immediately filled in everything just with the capital F. Let's try over here and just do the H for hourly and see what it's going to decide. So it started with hourly, but what if I then next do an A? So it doesn't always work that way, but you can just start with the first letter and you can get it. But I'll go back to my drop-down list and it says, hey, that doesn't match. You can't have an HA in there. I say, well, let me retry. Delete that out of there with the delete key, and now I go back to my drop-down list. So what about adding something to your drop-down list? Maybe later you decide you have one more type, and that's called temp. And so I might come over here and type temp, but you might be thinking, well, that's not part of our list. We already defined where our list was. Let's just see what happens. I come over here, drop-down list, and there is no temp listed. Well, this is pretty smart here, this area. If we insert something into this list, it will pick it up. Well, to insert, if you're not familiar with a previous lesson, you can click on any border of the selected cell, and you can click and drag that data and you can move it, but you have to hold down the shift key if you want to insert it. So I'm going to keep down my shift key, and I get what's called a shift insertion bar. It's showing me where it's going to insert it. Let's insert it right here as the second item, and I'll release my mouse first. And so I inserted temp. I took it from the bottom and I inserted it inside the list. And now let's take a look over here, and you see temp is number 2. This is also very useful because you might decide that you have a very long list. So let's try over here with our long list and look at some examples here. So these are departments. I'm going to come over here to departments. I'm going to select all of departments and come over to my data tools and data validation. I'm just going to click data validation this time, and it takes me right here to my dialog box. Any value? No, I want a list. And what is the source of my list? I'm going to click here to shrink my dialog box. Here is my list. I've got all of that. And I just go back here, open this back up, and say OK. Here's my list. This is very nice. Now, it can't show all of them. It does have a limit at about 8, and so then you have to scroll. So what if we decide that because this list is so long, we use ACD all the time? And this is not alphabetical either. And so it might be a little hard to find that list. So let's clean up our list a little bit. So I'm just going to click anywhere in our list here, and I could right click and choose sort, but it would probably pick up department and sort that. So what we can do is just make a selection first, right click, we're going to choose sort A to Z. Now we get a little message saying, do you want me to move all of these rows around based on this sort? No, we just want to continue with the current selection. Just sort within the selection. We say sort. So now it's sorted very nice for us. So it's very easy to find everything alphabetical. So A, and then the M's and the P's and the R's, and so we can find it easily. But let's say that product development here shows up all the time. So we want to move it maybe to the very top. So I'm going to try that trick again, where I'm going to click on a border and start dragging, but I'm going to hold down my shift key. But if I insert it up here at the very top, it'll be outside my list. It'll be above my list. I actually have to insert it here, Then I can take something from the top of my list and shift drag it down below, and now I put production development here, and then the rest is alphabetical. So we do have to be careful dragging things to the very bottom or the very top, from the very bottom to the top or the very top to the very bottom, because you're actually dragging it outside of the list range. So now let's try over here, department, drop down, and there it is. Production development, because we use it all the time, and then the rest is just alphabetical so we can find it quickly. So that is data validation used for controlling the information that we enter, as well as very quickly creating drop-down lists. Now there's one other thing that might be very useful, and that is to hide all of this so we don't see it as part of our data entry. A couple of ways we can do that. We can highlight all of our columns, right-click and choose Hide. We don't see them. They're not really secure. I mean, anyone could unhide them. We can see this little double line showing things have been hidden. And if you select the column on both sides of a hidden column, you can right-click and choose Unhide to bring it back again. But maybe we just want it somewhere completely different. So down below here, I have a List Worksheet tab that I created earlier. I'm going to take all of this information and I'm going to use Control X for cut. I'm going to go to my List tab, and just anywhere here I'll select and do Control V for paste. And you can see here I've zoomed out different on this tab, and we might need to best fit these. I'm going to select all of my columns, double click between any of them to best fit them so they all fit nicely. Let's go back to validate. It's no longer here, but does it still work? It does. So Excel actually tracks our lists and where we move them. And maybe for a little more security and to make things a little cleaner, we might even come over and right-click on List and choose Hide. And now that List tab doesn't show here anymore. To recover a tab, you can click on any tab, choose Unhide, and then you will see a list of all hidden tabs, and you can simply select it and say OK. Back to Validate tab. Very powerful tool and extremely useful for data entry, especially if you're sharing a worksheet or workbook with colleagues and you want them to fill out the data, but for all that data to be consistent.